How's it going, dating comic book investments? So I've gotten this question quite a bit. I figured I would just answer it the best I could. Should you even grade your comics? Now, I used to say there's only 2 reasons, but it's really more of 3 reasons why you should grade your comic books. I'm talking about grading professionally, CGC, CBCS, and soon to be PSA. There's also PGX and EGS and Vault and a slew of other ones that don't even, no, just don't. If you're going to get your comics graded, go with reputable ones such as CGC, CBCS is fine as well, and then PSA will be good too. Now, PSA hasn't come out yet, but PSA has been grading cards since the 90s, so they're very reputable. They're massive, huge company. Now, what are the 3 reasons why you should consider grading your comic book or collectible card or whatever you have? The main 3 reasons, number 1 is protection. So you could say, maybe I want to grade it because, I don't want it falling somewhere, getting damaged. So you want protection from the elements. Maybe, if it's a strong enough case that, when your house collapses, that your comic books are fine. Everyone else is dead, but your comics are safe. So that is one element, is protection. Number 2, another element is also it protects not only physical, but it protects the value of it. So investments. So not every comic is going to fall into each category. So maybe you have a very expensive comic book and you want to protect that value, that investment, knowing that, hey, I got a 5.0. It is a 5.0 Fantasy 15, and that protection, it protects the value of that comic book, whatever it goes for, $40,000, $50,000. It protects that value by securing that value. If you have it ungraded, then you run the risk of it going much, much cheaper if you try to sell it, or not being worth as much. If you don't ever care to sell it, then there's really no reason, other than protecting it from the elements, right? That's where the other protection. The third reason is being able to sell it. This is one that this is probably will fall in a check for most people, is being able to sell your comic books. A lot of people don't remember the times before because you aren't old enough or you weren't in comics before times. Before there was places like CGC to grade your comic books, you had to go off basically what the dealer said. The dealer was like, look, I think this is very fine, which is an 8.0 in these days. And then you just go, okay. And also back then, most people, the way they got their comic books was they would open a catalog. That's what my dad would sell, was catalogs, like 3, maybe 4 a year. You get a catalog and you go through and you're like, okay, I need an Avengers #1. Okay, he has 3 copies of Avengers 1 in good and fine, and then in near mint. And then you had to trust that dealer that what they said was true. And then who's to say what they even said is true? Because you could take it to a different dealer and they would maybe call that person's 8.0 of 7.0, or that person's 8.0 9.4. So it was kind of all over the place. So CGC makes it really easy. Now, you as the customer, consumer, whatever, you don't have to worry about having to figure out how to grade, because you can just buy, okay, this is a, CGC says it's a 5.0, it's a 5.0. Then when you go sell to the next person, it's a 5.0. If you want to do trades, it's easier to figure out the value of things because you look up, okay, what did the past 10 sales of this book go for, in the last 6 months or something like that. And you'll look at it and be like, okay, it's around this price for this grade. So that's how you know how much it's worth. Before, it was much harder. It still is hard. Even if you have a raw copy and you're trying to determine, a lot of people are like, well, is it restored? Is it incomplete? Is it missing a coupon? This, that, all that kind of stuff. Now, incomplete is pretty easy to check, but if you're trying to check for restoration and you aren't an expert in it and you don't know what to look for, you will get screwed. Just plain and simple. And it takes a long time to become an expert. You can watch a bunch of YouTube videos all you want, but that will cover 80% maybe of the stuff, but then that other 20% is going to be really hard to detect unless you're a professional and you've been doing this for so long. So sending it to CGC negates all that. Now you know, oh, I got a purple label. It's color touch, or it's trimmed, or whatever, cover trimmed, whatever, missing a page, something like that. So that is a very added benefit to getting a grade, because you're sending it to experts, you're paying them a very small fee, and it covers all that. So getting in and what you're getting, and when you go to sell, what you're selling and what that person, is also receiving. So it makes it very, very easy. Those are pretty much the three main reasons to grade your comic book. I'll go into in another video whether or not you should even grade your comic book to begin with. But for now, if you're thinking about grading your comic book, this is just kind of like gives you three reasons why. Now, you could have a book that maybe number 2, investable grade or value, it's not really there, right? It's, maybe a $20 book, a $5 book, a $10 book. Not really worth spending $20, $30, $40, $50 to send it off to get graded. So the investability is not really there. And also maybe it's such a cheaper book value-wise that maybe even turning around to try to sell it, it's not going to make much of a difference if it's graded or not graded. There's a lot of books that fall into that category. But maybe you love that book. Maybe it's your prized possession. Maybe it's the book that you grew up with and you want to protect it from when your dog eventually, gets diarrhea and starts pooping everywhere. You don't want it pooping on your comics. So then you want to protect it from diarrhea. And I did a whole video on how strong those cases actually are. I've ran them over with cars before and they stayed together. So there's that aspect. So when you're looking at your comic books and figuring out what you want to get graded, you have to look at all three elements and kind of determine what is your plan with your comic book. What do you want to do with it? If you're just someone that's like, look, I just have it, I love it, I just want to hold on to it, then maybe the protection route is the only one that applies to you. Another one is like, well, these are really valuable and, I want to protect my investment to make sure that what I have is, good. So it's like, okay, you do the investable way. Or maybe it's like, yeah, I actually want to sell it. So maybe you want to sell it. Maybe you have a $20,000 comic book, a $10,000 comic book, and you're like, or maybe it's a $500 comic book, and you're just like, okay, I want to sell it, but it's ungraded, it's raw, it's not graded by anything. Okay, you send it to CGC. Now you know that you can get that price because there is tons of websites out there, GPA Analysis. There's also Go Collect. You can also use Heritage sold section. You can use eBay sold section. There's tons of research out there that you can use at your fingertips to figure out what the value is. And so now if you send that in and it's ungraded and you're thinking about selling it, boom, now you can see, oh, it came back at 9.4. Okay, what does the 9.4 go for? Okay, it goes anywhere from $250 to $350. That's the range. Okay, now I know I can get that price for it. As opposed to, if not, you had to put up there and hope for that you get whatever you get and that someone trusts you, and then maybe you have to deal with returns. Unless you're doing it in person, then they can look at it in person, and then that makes it a little easier, but then there's a lot of negotiation. But when you have it graded, it's easier to negotiate because you're like, look, this is a 9.4. This is what they go for. I know I can go somewhere else and get this price. So stop lowballing me. And yeah. So those are the reasons why I would suggest getting something graded, whether it's a comic book or any collectible in general. Let me know your thoughts on what made you decide to get your comic books graded. If they are graded, maybe you don't want them graded. Maybe you like selling them raw. Still, people sell a lot of stuff raw, ungraded, even expensive books too. Very expensive. You'll go to a Comic Con and you'll see a Fantasy 15 on someone's wall, totally ungraded. So that happens too. There is a community for both. There's a community for people that just want graded stuff. There's a community of people that just like having raw stuff, how it naturally was. So let me know your thoughts. Have a great day.